Do you look in the sky a lot?
I'm in the process of going to get fuel for my gas.
This is Time and Space, hosted by Mike Smith.
He's a moron.
I am just a figment of your imagination.
So I want to turn my attention very quickly to what we'll call the music desk. We have a game we wanted to launch when the show first started called Name All 8, where I wanted listeners to actually call in or email in or whatever the case and tell us who the artist was and the songs were that we used, because I try to stick to one artist with each episode that I do. I've still been sticking to that formula, so this particular episode, as you can tell, we've used a couple songs by the same artist. Sure. And I've really enjoyed using the music and just trying to figure out what to do with it and everything, but we haven't gotten a response yet from anybody. No, there's a few things that have happened with the show.
Lil Wayne.
This is not Lil Wayne.
No, you're way wrong.
No, that's about the only hip-hop new artist that I would know about.
Well, that was the other funny thing.
Years ago, so.
Kirk, you said that a little while ago. You didn't, but you know who this is. I don't want you to say who it is, but...
I know who it is.
Yeah.
I lost track of them after their first album.
Tim is much more in touch with the hip-hop culture.
Not since...
but you're more in touch with...
I'd say probably not since, 2004, 2005.
You're more in touch with modern music.
I really haven't paid attention. But
I couldn't even tell you...
I know, I will say this. I do own the first album by this artist.
You own?
I own the first album by this artist.
Yeah, see, this was the first album by this artist that I own. Okay. It's like their third or something, okay. But, I love it. I love it. It's got some really great...
I don't love it.
Sorry to hear that.
I just don't. I'm not down.
Okay, all right. So that brings me to the next thing.
That's how I roll, playa.
There's a couple of music desk issues that are gonna stay unresolved with this episode. There's a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. We tried to touch on in a couple of earlier recordings, and we'll get back to some of those. But I love this whole thing. Faye tells this really, really funny story to me a few weeks ago, where it was really out of the blue, and it was all about timing and the way that he actually said it, but I can repeat it because I've done it in my head 1,000 times now, because I think it's one of the funniest things that he's ever said to me. We're talking about music, and he says to me, yeah, Pink Floyd fan. And I said, yeah, I know you're a Pink Floyd fan. How did you become a Pink Floyd fan, by the way? I mean, how did that actually happen? Where did you come up with it? There's this long pause, one of his great pregnant pauses. Long pause, and he says, when I grew up, I had 3 albums I could listen to. One was Barry Manilow, one was Simon and Garfunkel, one was Pink Floyd.
Who would you choose?
That was the whole story. That was all he said. That was the entire story.
That's what I'm talking
I can remember.
about.
I can remember down to the year when I became a Pink Floyd fan. But
Really?
It's a really...
For you, it was 1983. Your brother went to the concert.
No, it was much earlier than that. It's a creepy story, though. You don't want to hear it.
I thought it was when your brother went to go see Delicate Sound of Thunder.
No. This is when Dark Side of the Moon came out.
Dude, you're not that old.
This was in 1979, 1980. This was when Dark Side came out, and it was a really creepy story that you don't want to hear.
Okay.
I don't think it. I don't think
Fair enough.
But
let me move to something you guys were. We'll move off it. We'll move to something you guys were just discussing.
I was 5 years old when I became a Pink Floyd fan. I'll just put it that way.
That's a good age. That's a good age to become a Pink Floyd fan. I mean, it burns into your soul, man.
Right. It does. It does. I mean, because it's nothing that you've ever heard on the radio before.
I can be in line at Jimmy Cone, for example, in Damascus. I can be anywhere, and you can see an 18, 19, 22, 24-year-old kid walk by with a Pink Floyd shirt on. And it's usually one of 3. It's like Wish You Were Here, where the robot hands reaching out.
Right, I had that shirt.
It's the one with the, what's the thing called with the light that bends? Hook a Brother Prism, thank you. Or it's like Pigs. It's one of those 3 usually. And you see it, and you do, at some point, you have a connection with that kid.
Sure.
Even though you're like, okay, they probably really don't know jack about Floyd. Like, if I walked over to him and I asked him to tell me 2 songs off Umaguma, would they know any?
No.
Would they have ever heard of metal? Probably not.
The name Umaguma might actually be above them.
You could ask them if there's, how many sides are there to Echoes, and how, which side is exactly, just one song.
Ask them if they've ever heard When the Tiger Breaks Free.
Right.
which you can only find on the
And
movie or on
Faye, I think you and you certainly convinced me of this, was the album The Final Cut. I believe that is one of the albums that...
Well, listen, let me steer this back to the music desk.
Sorry to get off on
No,
that
it's all good. Let me steer this back to the music desk. I've got two...
raw meat to,
I got two Pink Floyd notes before I move on to something else. First, the ongoing argument, apparently, that you guys had, that I feel that was still unresolved. There was this whole thing about David Gilmour versus Roger Waters or whatever it was, and we're not trying to revisit that here. And secondly, in an upcoming episode with Alice Von Cannon, we're going to be talking about Freemasons and Masons and secret societies and all this other stuff. She has some really interesting stuff in her book about the Beatles. And I would like to bring that up to you during that recording of that episode. There is a Pink Floyd connection. I believe I could be on the verge of a groundbreaking theory. I'm just going to leave it with that teaser. I'll tell you guys about that more when we get to that episode. But Pink Floyd Beatles connection, listen for it with the Masons episode. All right. Really good stuff. You guys were talking just a few minutes ago about Slash and Guns N' Roses, and I want to bring that up real quick. Because TK, let's reintroduce just real quick. TK, welcome back to the show once again.
Good evening.
The commander of the Interstate Space Station. TK in the house. You may not know this, sir, but before this last trip that I took to Turkey and India, I actually had the privilege of going to Verizon Center and seeing Van Halen.
The David Lee Roth Van Halen?
The David Lee Roth Van Halen. Now, I have to say that this show was, and I don't think this is going to come as a surprise to anybody, this show was not, in any way, of course, the 1984 tour or anything of, people jumping around.
Was Eddie Van Halen's kid playing bass?
No, it was just the four guys on stage, and here's the thing.
It wasn't Michael Anthony, though.
It was Michael Anthony.
Oh, it was.
And here's the thing that you would really be thrown off by, is that these guys may not be jumping around on stage with all the fireworks and the special effects. They can play, dude. They can play. They can play, and they tore up every song that they played. I mean, there was not a song in the mix where I was like, wow, that was terrible.
First concert I ever went to was 5150 tour at the Capitol Center.
There you go. So, but the funny discussion that was going on was the guy that hooked me up with the ticket at the kind of the last minute, and there's a bunch of other strange, funny connections that I won't bother with on the show here. This guy gets me this ticket, and he's sitting there with me in the seats as we're waiting for Van Halen to come out. We're actually in our seats, just a few minutes to go before the show is actually going to start. And he says to me, I got this buddy, the guy that got me the tickets. He didn't actually come to the show because he's just not an Eddie Van Halen fan. And I'm like, well, okay. I mean, if you're into rock music, but how are you not an Eddie Van Halen fan, right? I mean, I've actually, I don't think, ever heard anybody say that.
Nor have I.
He's a Slash fan. He's a Slash fan, and he thinks that Slash is way better than Eddie Van Halen. At which point, I think that my buddy is pulling my leg.
Ooh, that's a bold statement.
That's a pretty
I'll tell you what,
statement.
Slash was never exposed. Slash was never as good as self-promoting. He was always in the background. He was always covered with hair. People didn't know who he was. Seriously, man.
That may be the case.
Slash was very... I'm not saying he was better or not.
I'm
not making a comment on that. The comment that I'm making is, even had he been better, he did not market himself as well as...
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. I went back and looked up later for my buddy, just for fun, the two, and Rolling Stone had put out like 100 greatest guitarists of all time. Slash number 64. Eddie Van Halen number 8. The other thing,
was Jimi Hendrix on that list, and what about Satriani?
Like one or two. Satriani was probably top 10. I didn't actually look at the list.
Satriani was a...
The other thing that was funny to me was that when I actually looked up the Wikipedia article on Slash, it was like, Slash finally gets a Hollywood star. He was really excited to have his Hollywood star put on the sidewalk right there next to Eddie Van Halen.
Is Prince on that sidewalk? And was Prince on that list? Was Prince on that list?
Prince has to be on that list. I would personally put Prince, way up there, like
You'd
top
put him
25.
top 25.
Oh,
yeah. Of course you would.
Yeah, sure. Well,
and I'm saying I'd put him at top 30.
Prince.
I'd put him top 30. I mean,
he's Prince.
But was it electric guitar or just guitar?
Well, it's
because there's some guys that played
I'm not going to get into this.
I'm just asking a question.
If our buddy Ann is listening to this, she's going to start laughing because she actually had somebody write me an email. Well, not write me an email. Write her an email that she forwarded to me, to say something like, "Oh, Prince, he's a real washed-up, kind of guy," and why does anybody still listen to him? Why are they still fans? Yeah, why are we still fans? Let's see, 2010 Grammy for Best R&B Performance, by a male vocalist or something like that, and the recent album 21 Nights, where he did 21 consecutive sold-out nights at the O2 Arena in London.
How do you do 21 consecutive nights
consecutive
sold out in the same city
in London,
anywhere?
Right, in the same city.
I mean, what is he, like Cats on Broadway?
Right.
I mean, seriously, you're putting him up against...
Well, the album is sick. I'll just say
he obviously has
I haven't heard it.
He obviously has a gigantic library of music to choose from that he can play.
There's that.
That does help that he's mucho productive. I mean,
the guy plays five different instruments.
Prolific, I think, is the term we like to use.
Yes.
That's
you have to be productive to be prolific, but yes, good correction.
Welcome back to Time and Space.
I do like your black and red DC United colored mic stand
the sock,
whoopee.
The mighty sock, the Gabe sock.
The whoopee.
It's another Gabe sock over the microphone as my little spit guard. Welcome back once again to timeandspaceus. My name is Mike Smith, and I am at least the writer of the show, if not the host. I am joined today by TK, the commander of our Interstate Space Station. We used to want to do a couple of different segments. Where in the world is TK, and what would TK do, and a couple of others. I'm not sure what to say about those, but I will say this, TK, we're going to do a revealing personal interview after we finish this last sort of round of stuff as far as the Adana, Istanbul, and Gobekli Tepe episode goes. Mr. Fay, of course, wanted to turn the tables and become the interviewer. You will be the interviewee. Do you have any sort of pre-interview statement you'd like to make?
Just as I said before, I'm not a very well-read individual, although I do have some...
I don't get the impression he's trying to... He's actually trying to get to the... cut to the core.
I have
spin zone.
I have some college experience, if you will. Those who've filled out applications of various sorts will recognize that, but I do like to think I am sort of in the know as to what's going on culturally around the world.
We'll be interested to see
in the news, and
All right. Well, how about this? This next story is going to definitely, catch you off guard. This is the one story, I said this to you guys as we were just starting to set up here today. This is the one story that I actually did blurt out and tell Faye. And I got the expected reaction out of him, but I think that this is going to sort of be an interesting preview for our discussion later in the TK Returns to the Show interview that will follow this. Coming up, a quick discussion of Gobekli Tepe, an archaeological site in Turkey that has turned the archaeological world on its head. It's got some pretty interesting implications and details, and I'd like to share a few things that I have found. But first, I'd like to share with Mr. Kirk a very interesting email exchange that took place in the midst of my trip. So, I'm in India, and I find out that I'm going to be sent back to Turkey. And I get on email. I had just been in Turkey, went to India, got to India, found out I'm going back to Turkey, get on email, contacted people back in Turkey to say, hey, I'm coming back. I just got told I have to come back.
Okay.
Now, my background, is just the way that I do things. I jump on email and I say, hey, I've got a guy that's met up with me here. Not in so many words. A guy's met up with me here in India, and we're going to be sent back. I'm thinking to myself, I got to type an email. Okay, so this guy, my partner and I, we're going to get sent back to Turkey here, and I'm going to need to get hotel reservations, right? Just get set up again to make this return visit. And the woman that I'm emailing to, she writes me back, and apparently the use of the term partner was what sort of caught her attention. She says to me, yeah, the hotel, that's not going to be a problem. We'll get you all set up there. The hotel might want to charge you a little bit extra for each night. How long is your partner going to be staying with you?
Making an assumption.
Excuse me?
Making an assumption.
Excuse me?
She kind of jumped to a couple of conclusions.
Okay.
As somebody said, she didn't actually do anything wrong. She made some bad assumptions. She I immediately
on the side of being politically correct.
I emailed back and said we're going to need 2 rooms. Thank you very much for asking. I'm not sure exactly how that. So that was sort of my my return to Adana. But nonetheless, I was very excited to get back to the great nation of Turkey. It was.
If I can just interject here real quick, I'm sorry. Based upon that story, I heard something very interesting on the radio the other day, and I did some follow up online to look at the Rasmussen polls and different things that have been done on the subject. And apparently, they were curious as to what Americans thought the population of homosexuals in the United States was by percentage. So I'm driving along and I'm listening to this on the radio, and this is before I checked it out online, obviously. And they asked that question, and of course they pause for a second, and you think like you do when you're driving or whatever, and you've got an idea in your head, and I'm thinking, okay, 6 to 8%. Okay, well the actual percent is like 2.8%. Is what they're saying, okay? Now, whether that's people that have come out or people that haven't, I don't know. But when they posed that question to Americans, 33% of Americans, 1 in 3 Americans, thought that the rate was over 25%.
I'm not surprised by that at all.
Now, see, that's funny because
I don't think that's funny. I think it's disturbing.
I think anybody over 45 that you ask that question of, especially our parents' age, so let's say over 55.
They think 25% of the U.S.
like
population
2%.
is gay.
They think that. But if you ask an older person that question, their response is, why would someone think it's that high? And you're like, well, it's easy, TV. I mean, watch TV. 1 out of every 4 characters on TV, on mainstream TV.
Right.
I don't want to say 1 out of 4, but okay, there's a lot of gay characters nowadays. I remember when Ellen
DeGeneres. I don't
DeGeneres
think 1 out of 4 is that much of a reach.
But 15 years ago, there were no gay people on TV.
Right.
So I think they
call it 2 out of 10. That's your 20% right there.
Yeah.
Call it 2 out of 10 characters on
crazy?
TV.
At least, yeah, and that's about right. Yeah, you're right, Tim. That's a good call.
Yeah.
And then they bump it up a little because if you talk to like my daughter, she thinks that there's tons of gay people in her school. How many are confused? How many are gay? And I'm not making any judgment on gay people or not. I'm just making an observation that TV has produced this image where people think that 25% of the population is homosexual. Well, apparently, like 10% of the people that answered the question said 50%. Now, besides the fact that wouldn't make any sense, if half the people were homosexual, who are the other half of the people marrying, and where the hell are all these babies coming from?
Oh, the math.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I have a little
It was
thing,
shocking. It was shocking to me.
a little thing that I saw, I don't know if it was on CNN or MSNBC or CNBC, where in the last, I would say, 4 to 8 years, depending on which administration you look upon, but in the most recent polls, they polled like 8 or 10 years ago how many people approve of gay marriage, and I think the percentage was like 25, 30%, something like that.
It hasn't changed in the last 10 years.
In the last 10 years, it's now up to like 56%.
It hasn't changed in the last 10 years. They've changed the way they've asked the question.
Okay. Then
10 years
that's the way that they're reporting.
Now they ask if they think that people should be able to have like equal rights under the law as far as domestic partnerships go. They've changed the way they've asked the question.
Okay.
Well, it's interesting you would say that, because I had a conversation with a British guy on one of these trips, and I said that to him. What is the deal? I mean, you guys, everybody wants to crack on the U.S. and the way that the U.S. looks at gay marriage, and it's such a big issue. And I don't want to get into this whole gay marriage discussion. It's just that, hey, what do you guys do about that in the U.K.? And he kind of looked at me, and I said, well, do you have gay marriage in the U.K.? Yeah, we have it.
They don't have civil unions.
And that's what I said to him. I was like, well,
Right.
no, do you have marriage? Like it's like actual legal marriage. He says, no, it's common law.
Right.
I said, it's limited.
It's
right.
not the government forcing a church to perform a service.
Exactly.
Correct.
And that's really the bottom
Correct.
line to most people in the U.S. is, I was raised Catholic, for example. I don't think that the Catholic Church should have to employ people that don't believe in the tenets that they need to teach in the school. You know what I'm saying? They shouldn't. It's a private enterprise, and
Sure.
for someone in New Hampshire to say you have to perform a marriage ceremony in your Catholic Church, even though you don't agree with it, doesn't really make any sense.
No, it's the reverse of separation of church and state. People are
Right.
usually trying to pry church out of the state, but in that
Get the
case,
state out of the church.
Get the state out of the church.
That's a fantastic comparison.
I mean,
Exactly.
really.
Exactly.
Do I think that gay people should have all the rights in a common law marriage that married people do? Sure. That's just me. I don't care. It doesn't bother me one way or another. But I can't call it marriage because by definition, a marriage is a union between.
As you say, the way that they've been asking,
it's just ridiculous how much time is spent on this subject right now.
The way they've been asking the question is definitely a key point as well. How much time are we at on this?
We're at like 25 minutes, dude.
Okay, I was just going to say let's go ahead and knock this one out of the box, and we'll wrap up this particular segment and get back, and we'll do Gobekli Tepe and the last couple things we have to do for this this episode. You're listening to the Time and Space Radio Show. We're renaming it officially just timeandspace.us. That's where you can find us online. Find us on Facebook at Listener22 and YouTube, UFO Writer 22. I'm Mike Smith with TK and Executive Chef Mike Fay. This is timeandspace.us. We'll be back in just a moment. That wasn't very loud, was it?
No, but it's fine, dude. You can crank it up.
Should I crank it here?
Because it's at the very end. So
this is timeandspace.us.
That's right. That's good.
Nice.
Yes, sir.